Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
It's me, Egbert, once again. I'm the new owner of this station. I went out and hired the best talk radio consultant, Jeff Allen from News Talk STL, and told him to hire the worst talent he could find. Jeff did exactly as I told him. Ladies and gentlemen, here are Brad and John.
John, it is a Friday, my favorite day of the entire week. I always loved Fridays. When you were a kid, did you look forward to Fridays?
Oh, yeah. Like I think we talked about it before, Brad. The idea of getting home and just getting on your bike and being free for a couple days.
Right. Not have to have the stupid school to go to and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and Brad, you and I mean, everybody can tell based on our current conversations that you and I always wore bicycle helmets. We knew we always put safety first, and we are not walking around with any sort of concussions from our childhood days at all.
Speak for yourself, John.
We always – did you ever own a bicycle helmet?
No, never.
Of course not.
Matter of fact,
I don't mean to interrupt, Brad, but I had a friend who in fifth grade he put on a bicycle helmet, and we were like, I mean, in retrospect, it's one of those things you're not proud of, but we just rode him mercilessly for putting on a bicycle helmet.
Well, see, don't get me going on that because of the fact that I've always been like sort of the out of the box kind of thinker, and I used to always say that, and once again, I've talked about this before. We talked about this when I was on the air with Shelley, and Shelley used to always just roll her eyes and just think I was the stupidest guy in the world when I talk about this. If you go to any emergency room, and I know a couple emergency room doctors, and you talk to them about, to this day, even with airbags and 3-point seatbelts and all that kind of stuff, what is the most common fatal injury in a car accident is usually a head injury. Your head, whacks against the, and let's assume that you do have your seatbelt on, the airbags deploy. Even still, your head hits the roof of the car, or it hits what they call the A post or the B post, or you whack into the steering wheel, whatever. Okay. I, for years, have said that if everybody wore crash helmets in their cars, it would cut down on the number of deaths. And people go, oh, my God, I can't believe he said that. And the idea being is look at the NASCAR guys. Look at the guys who wipe out at 200 miles an hour. The car flips over 42 times, and the guy unbuckles his safety harness and climbs out and is fine. Now he's shook up. He's got, but yet, and once again, the idea being is that he's got all the safety equipment. He's got the harness on. He's got what they call the Hans, which is the thing which stabilizes your neck and that kind of stuff. Just don't get me going on that kind of stuff.
And, well, I know that the Hans is also named after Hans Wyman, who can get you a good deal on some hair plugs.
And thank you, Hans, because he did a nice job with my hair plugs.
He
okay.
Sure did. I mean, for an 88-year-old guy, Brad, you've been around almost as long as Coldwater Creek radiation.
I was there when they were dumping the soil.
Yeah, I bet you were.
Okay.
That's why you glow in the dark. You don't even need a pink safety vest, Brad. You glow in the dark naturally.
See, now here's what's interesting. You're making fun of my pink safety vest.
I didn't say I was making fun of it. I said it's pink.
But you noticed it, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I noticed a guy, over Bill Eigel and Jay Ashcroft's shoulder, and I'm like, is he there to break up a fight, or is he there to capture some content?
What was the lady's name? I can't remember. Her Burner, or was Burns?
Oh, Trisha Byrne.
Yeah. Okay. Coldwater Creek. Okay. I've told this story numerous times before. And once again, I have people that told me, I don't believe that. And here's the interesting aspect of this. There was one of the sites where they dumped a lot of this nuclear waste was on the north side of the airport. Specifically, if you take McDonald Boulevard between Lindbergh and Airport Road. Matter of fact, if you know where the original McDonnell Douglas headquarters is, there's sort of a fork in the road there, and you can continue on McDonnell, or you can make a little bit of jog to the left and go over an Airport Road and go about a quarter mile, and you're on 170, okay? For a long time, for like decades, there has been a nuclear waste cleanup site right there on the south side of McDonnell, right there between, and that's on the north side of the airport, and if you're familiar with the airport, it would be closer to the runway of what is designated as 624. Essentially, at the St. Louis airport, you have two parallel runways, which roughly, actually, there's three. Technically, there's two parallel runways, and there's one the new runway, which is not necessarily parallel. Once again, I'm splitting hairs, but if any of the aviation guys would listen, they go, well, the third runway is not technically parallel. I get it.
We'll screw them.
Okay.
For the most people, they get what you're saying.
Okay, there's 4 runways out there, and 3 of them are pretty much east-west, but one of them is sort of north-south, and the north-south runway, 624, if you go just a little bit farther north from that runway, you have this area where they've dumped all this nuclear waste. And for years, there's been people up there working. They have their own railroad spur where they dig up the dirt, they put it in these hopper railroad cars, and where in the world it goes, nobody knows, but it goes out of the area. Just to the north of that, on the north side of McDonald, right across from where the guys are wearing moon suits, there were baseball fields that, back in my younger days, I played a couple of championship games at, and then a little bit older, I umpired. I think they were called the ABC fields, okay? And you talk to
and that's already been contaminated, right?
Well, yes, but
that's what ABC stands for.
Already been contaminated. No, I don't know what it was. But see, the interesting part of it was everybody thought that all the contamination was on the south side of McDonald. And I know lots of people who not only grew up in that area and played baseball in those fields, but also worked at various companies. Matter of fact, I have a couple of friends of mine that worked for companies in North County who talked about they used to go play softball in those fields a whole bit. Okay, I want to say about 15, 20 years ago, they come out and they go, the north side of McDonald is contaminated as well, too. So within like the past 2 years, if you drove along McDonald, and I've been there several times in the past several years, they had the excavators on the north side of McDonald tearing all the dirt out. Well, a couple weeks ago, an announcement came out that MoDOT, or either MoDOT or St. Louis County, is going to close down McDonald Boulevard to rebuild the McDonald Bridge over Coldwater Creek. Okay, first off, there is no bridge; it's a culvert. My dad was My dad was a civil engineer. There's a big difference between a culvert. A culvert essentially is like, for the most part, could be like a pipe running underneath a highway that has dirt on top of it, and then you pave it over. So now what they've determined is that area right there, that all the dirt underneath McDonald, right there where the culvert is for Coldwater Creek, is also contaminated. So they've closed down McDonald Boulevard, and they say it'll be closed for a year as they rebuild the Coldwater. And once again, I've heard this on other stations, and they're rebuilding the Coldwater Creek Bridge on McDonald Boulevard. No, they're not. They're taking away all the contaminated soil. It's all over that area. And once again, this crazy thing with Coldwater Creek. Coldwater Creek actually starts on the south side of Interstate 70. It goes through St. Anne, goes underneath I-70 between the Natural Bridge exit and the airport exit, right where that big monstrous tank is if you're going east on 70, and it goes underneath the airport, goes underneath the runways in a big old monstrous culvert. It comes out of the airport on the north side of the airport. Then it goes underneath McDonald in a culvert, and then it winds its way up through North County, up through Florissant and Hazelwood, and then through unincorporated St. Louis County, right up the street from, what is that, Arrow Point grade school there?
Yeah, Arrow Point right up there at 367 and Parker.
No, Jamestown.
Jamestown, you're right. 367 in Jamestown.
Jamestown. And then ultimately the creek empties into, and I'm not exactly sure, it either empties into the Missouri before the Missouri becomes part of the Mississippi, or it enters into the Mississippi after the Missouri. I can't remember exactly where but once it goes all the way from south of the airport all the way through North County into the rivers. And it's been going on for if you go back, and matter of fact, it's funny, I watched just last night, I'm a nerd, I watch all these crazy stuff. I watched another special about the atomic bomb and the making of the atomic bomb. And by the way, did you know that there were atomic bomb number 3, atomic bomb number 4? They were ready to make
12
different atomic bombs. And
That's right.
And the big controversy was atomic bomb number 3, because they bombed, first off, they bombed Hiroshima, and then they bombed Nagasaki. And at that point in time, after Nagasaki, the Japanese said they would sign a conditional surrender. And the Allies, including England and at the time Russia, Stalin, and FDR, said, no, we're not taking a conditional surrender. It's unconditional surrender or nothing. Yep. And they were literally in the process of assembling the third nuclear bomb, which, depending upon which historian you look at, was headed for Tokyo. Now, imagine that. Imagine if we would have bombed Tokyo. Nagasaki and Hiroshima were large cities, but by the standard compared to Tokyo, were like, pimples on an elephant's butt. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I shouldn't say
know.
that. But
and hey, by the way, as an aside here, I think it's important to note, that's why every year we see so many Japanese people in the streets rioting, burning things, because when they face an atrocity, Brad, they carry it with them. They don't leave it in the past. Japanese people focus on their victimhood and how terrible America is. And that's why they go around running around rioting, burning things, because they can't get over what happened in the past. That's the way the Japanese people are, Brad.
Well, the nuclear thing started in the late 30s and actually went into the early 40s and actually 1945 when we actually dropped the bombs. And this is how long this has been going on. So in other words, right now we're in the year 2024. So there is probably nuclear waste up there in North County, which probably dates back from maybe the early 1940s. Okay, let's say it dates back from 1944. Okay, let me think. 1944, 2024. What's the difference between those 2 years?
70 years.
80 years, John.
80 years. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, you're right. That is 80
years. And we're still kicking the can down the road. Now, once again, Josh Hawley, Ann Wagner, Cori Bush, they're all right. There's no excuse for this. And especially when we're sending millions and billions of dollars to Ukraine, and when we've got all these goofy, stupid social programs that they're throwing money at. I mean, how many people have been impacted in the St. Louis area? And unfortunately, it still goes on. Remember, we had that story a couple weeks ago that in Florissant, they have that subdivision. Remember, I told you it looked like a relatively new subdivision, maybe like 20 years old, where it was built on a landfill, and it was built on the floodplain of the Coldwater Creek. And when the Coldwater Creek used to flood, that area was inundated with the nuclear waste stuff. And then they filled it in and put houses on top of it, and they were drilling holes in people's basement to take soil samples because the houses were built on contaminated, essentially old floodplain from Coldwater Creek, and they're not that old houses. It still goes on today, but yet
the key quote from Cori Bush that's in Rosenbaum's piece, she says, "How is it that our government always has endless funds for war, but refuses to find the money to repair the harm it caused?" Now, you could take that quote and you could put that in Brad Hildebrand's mouth and John Combest's mouth and most right-wingers' mouth right now, Brad.
I'm having an argument with somebody right now. I'm going to ask you this. Is Hazelwood Central, is that in Florissant or unincorporated St. Louis County?
Oh man, so it's at Newhall's. You know what? I think it's probably unincorporated. I don't think that's in Florissant proper. You could probably Google the boundary of the city of Florissant.
I agree with you on that. And I have a person who actually who works for the Hazelwood School District saying it's in Florissant. See, the reason for this is because there's a new controversy about the crazy thing with the beatdown up there at Hazelwood East. Because have you heard the latest thing that there are no campus resource officers for?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that Bailey talked about when he was on Fox News.
Right. And the reason for that is that the Hazelwood School District would mandate any of the police to take this extensive DEI class before they could be SRO, what they call it, student resource officers, whatever they call it.
School resource officer,
Yeah, or I've heard it called CROs, campus resource officers. And an interesting thing was it was originally reported that Hazelwood East, that the Florissant police would not do that for Hazelwood East. Well, part of the problem with it is that Hazelwood East isn't in Florissant. See, what's so crazy about this? You and I being North County boys, when people talk about like, oh yeah, remember who was the Valentina? What was her name?
Valentina Gomez.
Right.
Yeah, and by the way, last time I checked, her tweet is still up. She still wants Matt Robinson to resign.
Mayor of Hazelwood. Because
and by the way, I have the Florissant map up now. And as you look at Newhall's Ferry, I'm zooming in on this. Your friend may be right. Newhall's Ferry, Florissant goes over to the Newhalls Ferry, right around Vail. So
well, then
I don't know. You might want to Google it because you might know exactly that location better than me. I'm trying to zoom in on it now.
Well,
if it's not in Florissant proper, it's real. I mean, it's real close.
Well, I can tell you this. It didn't used to be in Florissant. If it is in Florissant now, it didn't used to be because of the fact that when I went to school back in the day, when it was just Hazelwood, not Hazelwood Central, if we had police response, it was always St. Louis County Police.
Yeah. And you know what? It looks like it is Hazelwood Central is just barely within. I think it is, Brad. I think it is within.
Well, they annexed it then because it wasn't Florissant wasn't up there.
No, wait a minute. It's out. It's out of the boundaries. It's just barely out of the boundaries.
See, that's
Brad.
what I thought. Can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Do you have that where you could screenshot that for me and send that to me?
Absolutely. I'll do it right now.
Okay. I appreciate it because, see, once again, I don't know about you, but when somebody starts dissing North County, I'm the guy that's going like, okay, knock it off. I lived there for most of my, from the time. See, here's my path. Talk about me having an interesting path of growing up. I was born at Barnes Hospital. My parents at the time lived in North City. I lived not too far from what used to be the old Chevy plant off of Union, okay? Then we moved to Jennings. Then we moved way up north to the point where I could walk down to the Missouri River where I lived. I lived on a farm for about a year, believe it or not, way up in North County in what was called the Coos Farm, Kuhs. It was a very rich guy that at one point in time was a huge real estate developer in North County, owned a couple car dealerships, the whole bit. We lived in the Coos Farm for about a year, and then my dad built his house, literally designed and built it himself. I mean, not brick by brick, but he designed it and engineered it and the whole bit. And we lived there. Matter of fact, my parents lived there, up until both my mom and dad passed away. So my dad passed away in 2002, and my mom passed away in 2012. And so they lived in that house for a long time on Claudine, which is the street where, guess what happened, John?
Yeah, Maurice DeClue attacked Kaylee Gain.
Right. So when people talk about North County, been there, done that, lived that. And the other thing that cracks me up is people always talk about, oh, North County's always been such a terrible place. John, once upon a time, when I grew up in North County, it was a great place to live. It really was.
Yeah, I remember the 1980s, Brad.
Well, Florissant had the reputation for years and years, for decades, as being one of the safest cities in the country. Very low crime rate, partly due to the fact that Mayor Egan, who is the mayor there, who ran the city with an iron fist. Some people say he had too much power, but that's neither here nor there. But see, once again, whenever these people talk about North County, it's always been like low class, blue collar. It's always been like poor people live up there, and they live in little shanties and stuff like that. It's like,
yeah, they just don't know.
Drives me nuts. Okay, so you agree with me that Hazelwood is not in Florissant then? The Hazelwood High School?
I have just screenshotted it, and on the commercial break, you will have it in your inbox.
Okay. You going to email it to me, or are you going to?
I'm going to email it to you.
Okay.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?